Hello, LinkedIn, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the planet you're watching this. I'm very happy to have another great LinkedIn live session, Q&A session, this time with Erik Lund. He spoke during the Makers and Movers Summit last week on the panel on supply chain visibility, facts, and buzzwords. So he's here to answer some of the questions that came out of there. So brief introduction for Erik before we begin. He's the head of Visilion, which is the asset tracking and supply chain visibility solution provided by Sony Network Communications. It's based on IoT and 5G enabled technology. And Visilion pretty much allows manufacturers of critical and high value assets, as well as logistics service providers, to gain control over their supply chain. Erik has many years in transport and logistics. He has done also technology, as well as he has worked in the enterprise software space. And he was as well involved as a strategy consultant in one of the previous jobs, and is also no stranger to entrepreneurship, having collaborated with several startups and corporate innovation arms along the way. Erik, pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, Rado. Pleasure being here, and happy that you can breathe again.
Yeah, I try. So, some of the questions that came from last week, and it's also questions that are very much related to the topic of visibility. Well, the first one is a bit counterintuitive, but how much visibility is too much visibility? Is that even a thing?
I think it's maybe the wrong way of framing the question is, I think visibility is great, and again, the visibility is great. Same question you have with data is too much data. Is anything like too much data? It really comes down to how you use it. For certain, anything else than what a carrier pigeon can deliver to you is too much, right? For others, they seek a much more granular view on what is happening in the environment.
Yeah, and I guess you as a provider of different traceability solutions, you work with the spectrum of clients, but there are certain there are certain bottlenecks. One of them is outdated tech, I guess, or outdated systems or outdated processes. Talk to us a little bit about that, and how do you overcome it, right, with a solution that is obviously cutting edge like yours?
It's difficult, and you're touching on a point where how do you enable the ambitions companies have, and we are a component. We think that we're an important component, but we are only a component, and where you do see where people really harvest benefits of this, really look for integration between a real-time visibility platform as ourselves, integration with the TMS, with the warehouse management system, with the more broader supply chain visibility solution. And I think even though that both the customers of the logistic providers as well as logistic providers themselves have come a far way, particularly on the customer side, the manufacturers and so on and so forth. There's still a way to go. We do see that carriers, logistic providers have moved a lot just within the last couple of years, and part of it has also been enabled by the COVID situation. But there's still certain inherent mistrust in how people collaborate together, particularly in the traditional shipping industry, that hinders the free exchange of relevant data.
Yes. And I think you also made, or there was a comment in the last session, that visibility and systems sometimes take a secondary position when a disaster strikes. I don't know how accurate or not it was, but it was a comment that was done on the sideways of the discussion. So I guess one question would be, is that true? The other question would be, if that is true, how can we do disaster management better?
I would say that unfortunately, the majority of things, when a disaster strikes, then the long-term thinking and the visibility that you're working on takes the back seat because you don't have accurate visibility. I think I mentioned that I've been having a conversation with a German white good manufacturer that was in the context of the Ever Given in stock in Suez situation, where they said that for them it took several days just to get the understanding: are our goods behind or before the Ever Given? So do we have an issue or don't we have an issue for them? And they are collaborating with some of the world's largest logistics company. It still takes multiple days for this information to come back, right? And then you go in crisis mode. Then you have to plan for how do we make things continue as they are, right? Rather than being able to, and those are some of the points when we talk visibility also. In visibility can help to make the right decisions in the moment, but having the overall visibility, and I know we're talking very broadly now, also help build the resilience. So when you have one fail point, then you have the backups. You understand what you need to do, whether it's multi-sourcing, whether it is having understanding that you need to run up your stores higher, and so on and so forth, right?
And I'm actually to the point that you made with, and I see also a question coming, to the point that you made with the fact that you integrate into a wider system, right? So do you normally also almost approach the market from an angle of, okay, let's work with the planning or software or IBP planning softwares that then can give you insights also from the planning side all the way to the end side? Do you usually also take that approach, or I'm just curious that this come to my mind also?
No, it is. It is. I'd say there's a twofold answer to that. We as Sony Visilion, I guess a lot of the use cases we talk about are how do having real-time visibility help you in certain specific use cases that are do I experience that things are happening that might mean that my cargo is being damaged? Do I experience situation that means that my cargo is being delayed? Do I experience situation that means that my cargo is disappearing? Those are some of the basic use case for the real-time aspect, right? But that also sort of put a framework about the perception of what are the types of companies you talk with. But then when you look at the more longer term perspective and actually start to see the companies, even with low value products or lower value products, that have massive distribution challenges, where being able to orchestrate the arrival of the trucks to the loading gates across multiple production sites, across multiple distribution sites, having the visibility even in those cases to see, okay, I have a truck waiting for loading, or I have a truck that has not confirmed arrival, or a truck that's being late, to be able to optimize for that. And even though that the perception that the core product doesn't really substantiate a more advanced solution, running the whole flow, being able to optimize the whole flow does sustain that, because waiting fees, demurrage, detention, whatever you have, having to deploy more assets than you really need to, really from an asset aspect game and the resource that you're putting into supply chain makes a lot of sense. And that's coming from where's my stuff to looking at the total flow with thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of moving bits and pieces. It really it's even a surprise to us, or positive surprise to us, that there's a big demand for being better at orchestrating things, and through the visibility doing the fine tuning in your supply chain.
We have Daniel here with us, more talking about plumbing. It seems like Daniel is still with the metaphor that you used during and there's a lot of plumbing needed, by the way, still in the global supply chain. Yeah, there seems to be one after the next.
Yeah, I'm I'm happy that something might be memorable that I've said, but I think for me it was such a perfect analogy of really what the situation is all about. If it works, we don't bother. It just has to be cheap. But if it doesn't work, suddenly you have really a smelly situation very quickly, right? And even in the case of Ever Given, you had ships with livestock waiting to come through that were running out of food, right? As such, so it really becomes very, very impactful very quickly, right? And for simple people like us in logistics, then it's important to use simple metaphors for what we're talking about.
And Iad is with us, and he's asking, when will it go mainstream, and what does it take to do so? I guess it's been a long discussion, or the potential that RFID has been in the cooking for a while now, many years, right? So fair question, good question. Let's talk about it.
No, but RFID is an interesting technology. The problem is that not the problem, but the challenge is that the infrastructure to harvest benefits of RFID is quite expensive, quite complex, right? And it doesn't travel well. So I can RFID enable a distribution center at my side. I have full control of what's going in, what's going out on my side. But when I then ship it, the RFID tag goes silent. And when it comes to a destination point, it doesn't check in unless there's an infrastructure in place for that. That's the real challenge. But you're touching on a very relevant point. For all of us, the holy grail is to enable end-to-end visibility from parcel on one shelf to a parcel on another shelf, or even further granular viewpoint. And what RFID does from a technology conceptual point of view, as well as price point, is very important. The question is what we can do as an industry for the RFID to connect better when it leaves a facility, and that's definitely not where we are. But we are continuing to look at it. We are continuing to look at a BLE technology, which can be an interim step. It's still at a more higher price point than RFID tag, but we've talked a lot about connected roll cages, connected pallets, and stuff like that, and that's definitely a part of the equation. You have to have the durability. You have to have the price point in place to really integrate it at scale as we're talking about.
I definitely think you should hire Daniel as part of the sales team. So he's saying it's amazing to see insights that emerge once companies have visibilities. It's hard to appreciate how much you will learn, how valuable it can be until you do it. Once you do it, it becomes a one-way bridge. You'll never be able to go back. So definitely, Daniel, put in the CV and application. Yeah. Erik is taking new heads of sales of his team, but it's also very true.
I think Daniel and I should go touring, maybe.
Yes, that's a good idea. Here's a question that comes from a different angle, and again, fair question. What happens to visibility when vessels are blocked? When trucks can't move because of natural disasters or whatever, strikes or whatever it can be? How can the data help in solving something without a clear timeline for actually solving the underlying issue? So, good question. Let's maybe go there as well a little bit further.
Yeah, it's a very broad question, because coming back to the earlier point in terms of visibility in helping you to build resilience. So as a part of the answer to that is, if you lose visibility in parts of your supply chain, parts of your sourcing, your action would then be to plan for using the other aspects of your plan to make sure that you don't have a breach. But as you know, the question also indicates you have vessel stock. We're seeing it, this spring with the bullwhip effect playing out across multiple verticals, where it's getting less and less predictable across the board, and visibility is part of the answer that can bring us back to a more stable environment for that, as well as I said, being able to work with the contingencies plans that you've made, rather than going ocean freight. You shift to your rail option if they are available, or even in certain cases looking at trucks or air freight option for certain critical goods. But as an answer to that question, I was speaking to a steel company this week, and for them it's critical, not only from a money point of view, that they can preempt needing to do urgent deliveries because of misalignments in supply chain, but also as a steel company having a relatively non-sustainable business, right? But driving to become substantially more sustainable. For them, it's super important to avoid those cases, so they can take the most optimal way of distributing their products to the customers, including from a carbon footprint point of view.
Yeah. I just want to add a conversation I had the other 2 days ago. Yeah, it was with a major alcoholic beverage actually company, and they were saying that the patterns have completely shifted from people consuming drinks in the bars to people consuming it at home because of the lockdown. So they've actually had to shift considerably their supply chain. Certain, the arm that was selling to the pubs and went down, obviously, and then the channel which sold through e-commerce or through supermarkets or through online or delivery went through the roof. So to the person in charge, it was a matter of, one, visibility was important. Two, planning became when you have these shifts and complete disruptions of supply and demand, it's almost happening concurrently during the current situation. You're saying that planning element becomes so critical, coupled with, you got to know what's going on across the board. But if you don't have the planning tools to make you able to take decisions quite fast, you're fairly in a hot spot as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that is the part of, if you have a clear view of your business, then you can make the decisions also quickly, right? If you don't have a clear view, then we need to go to a data gathering phase. You need to do analytics. You need to do your spreadsheet before you come to that conclusion, right? And that means that you have, there's an opportunity cost associated with it.
We have a question from Paul. I must admit, I don't fully understand it. So Erik, I'm just doing the right thing to do, which is throwing it at you. There is increased talk and releases about connected labels. Are they currently as limited as RFID in terms of an effective visibility solution?
I think if you talk about connected labels or smart labels, then it is basically as it is right now, a shorter lived, intended to be a shorter lived device that ultimately you could print out and glue on to shipments that would provide some connectivity at some duration of time. It is a promising technology. It is yet immature. It is something that we are taking huge interest in. Sorry. And again, it gives an opportunity of moving towards a more granular level. However, the question is what price point it will be at, and the price point to really go at scale is not there yet. However, definitely a question about a complex, advanced device as we have now that can do really multiple things, and is intended to do that, combined with if you're looking at relatively very low cost, simple, just tracking, is quite interesting. And as with everything, the technology will evolve. So it is definitely something to watch. And I think, you know, I probably cannot talk too much about the price point right now for that. But if you compare to a price point of an RFID tag, where we're talking in the cents, more or less, there's a gap to be bridged there still.
And as we're approaching the end, I'll just pull another question that came from the event platform, this one. I guess a kind of a good case study, right? If you can think of a company that's using IoT as its best and you know, maybe fully integrated sensor solution. Okay, I mean, but you know, fairly good, right? So let's take a very, you know, a good example of a client or something that you have seen, Erik, and maybe also give us some examples of how it specifically has it helped, right? Has it decreased cost? Has it, maybe if you have certain deliverables that you also were aware of?
Yeah. It is, I do at the current point in time not, I'm at the current point in time not able to point to a company that at an enterprise-wide have done an implementation that really encapsulates everything that we are talking about here. We're seeing a lot of companies working or ramping up to achieve scales, but the use cases are still quite specific. Certainly over the last X number of months, the vaccine shipments with multiple aspects of that is but again, it's limited to a use case within an industry, within a company, not something that is deployed across all product categories. The concept and the use case that I talked to a little bit before, in terms of actually looking at these low-cost products being distributed at scale, which is a dialogue that we're looking at now, is probably something of the most complete I've seen so far, that they really want to this being an integral part, building stone in achieving you know, full supply chain efficiency.
And look, I mean, it kind of boils down to the discussion, of course. So I guess maybe the frame of the question was a bit too broad. I don't know if any company would really want to do this for everything. As you rightfully pointed, it's about also focusing on the products and categories that make most sense, and there's the economics of it.
But certainly, if you look at us as Sony, there are categories of products that are important for us to track, that you want to have visibility about. There are other categories that are less important, and for the individual use cases. In the fall, when we had the launch of the PlayStation 5, there was an immense focus on security aspect within the distribution, driving that, you know, having alert, what you call fast response teams in certain geographies ready to engage if necessary, and so on and so forth. But again, looking across our multiple business lines, different approaches are being taken how to achieve your objectives within this area.
No, I mean, I'm sure my son, when he orders his PlayStation, he will want to. So that's a very also the margins.
Best regards, Erik, when it gets to him.
Also, the price tag is going to hurt my pocket, but for now it's 5, so I'm not planning to buy it. On that note, Erik, thanks a lot for joining. Great sharing as always. Keep up the great work, yeah, well, hope to see you soon in person. That would be a fantastic thing if we manage to pull that off in the next month.
Looking very much forward to it, and have a wonderful weekend.